Welcome back to the Wolff Den presented by Win Again Academy. Tomorrow there is a networking event at noon Eastern with Olympic softball champion Jessica Mendoza. And speaking of Olympics, today we welcome Myriam Glez to the show. How's everything going?
It's going well. Thank you for having me, Matt. It's great to be here. Appreciate it.
Excited to talk about all the good stuff that you're doing. But we always generally start with where you've been. So for the people in the audience who don't know who you are, give us a quick intro and we'll get into it.
Yes, so my name is Myriam Glez. I am originally from France. I was a synchronized swimmer for the French national team and the Australian national team. I competed in the Sydney Olympic in 2000 and the Beijing Olympics in 2008. I now live in the US and I'm the co-founder of Athlete Soul, which is a nonprofit organization which helps athletes transition away from sports.
Did you guys win a medal in the Olympics?
I finished fourth in Sydney, so right off the podium. And it was not a disappointment. It was actually a really good progress for our team. So it feels like a medal for me, even though we didn't get around. We didn't get it around the neck. It was a good progress.
It's an interesting thing. We've had Olympians on before. What's the feeling of coming fourth? Now, in some sports, it's different, right? You know right away where you're at. Others, you perform, and then you have to wait to see if anyone overcomes you. But what's that feeling about in fourth when you first realize you're fourth? I play poker all the time. The top three get the money, and you get that fourth. It's barely anything, and it's a terrible feeling. When you first felt that, and what was the difference between you guys being fourth or being on that podium? Because it could be hundredths of a second in some. I mean, you guys are more of a score, but it could be hundredths of a second. And from a score perspective, it's one of the reasons why I'm not as interested in gymnastics, because I know there's technique and there's scoring, but it is still someone giving you an opinion on what you did, right? And so a tenth of a point, 0.1, whatever it is, could be the difference between medaling or not. I know that was long. And we lost her. Maybe my question was too long there. Let's see if she can get back here. She might have hit the wrong button, but hopefully we'll get her back. Let's see if she gets back here. Anyway, I was just talking to Myriam about the Saturday Night Live bits on synchronized swimming. If you haven't seen them, there's an old one with Martin Short, and then a newer one that they just did. And Norm Macdonald actually has a great bit. I think it was Norm Macdonald on synchronized swimming. And check it out. I'll put the links in the underneath here. Again, technical difficulties, so let's give it a few minutes to see if she is able to join. And then let's find live TV here. Did anyone watch the Oscars? It's crazy how I used to watch these Oscars and I'd be like, I saw all these movies. And now even with Netflix, it's a lot easier. There were definitely some Netflix options out there, but trying to figure out which movies to watch. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once was actually on my list to see in the theater. Never got to it, so I have to do that. I thought Top Gun was good. I thought The Glass Onion was good. The Inner Shin with Colin Farrell, excellent. A lot of good movies out there. I'd have to go back and look at my list. Haven't seen Elvis yet. That's definitely on my list. And let's see. Okay, I think we're going to get Myriam back here. And we might have to reschedule, but not sure exactly what happened here. March 21st. This is what happens when you go live and you're unedited and unscripted. Didn't have a backup plan for what I was going to talk about, and we're back. We are back.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened here.
Oh man, you left me. I was hanging. I don't excel when I'm on my own just talking about. I was talking about the Oscars. Did you watch the Oscars?
I did not.
No. Are you a movie person?
I was traveling last week and was not able to watch the Oscars.
Do you know if you've seen any of the movies that were there, or what the best movie you saw was last year?
I don't know. I haven't really been watching a lot of movies recently.
I watch a lot of movies. I was just saying, I'd have to go to a list. I saw The Glass Onion, which was the Knives Out movie. That was good. Top Gun was good. I have to see Elvis. The Inertian movie with Colin Farrell was pretty good. Anyway, we got you back here. I'm going to shorten my long-winded question. It was the moment you knew you were going to be fourth and not third. What was that like? And what was the difference between, what could you have done? How close were you to being third?
Yeah, I was saying before we got cut off that it was 0.1, so 0.1 was very close. Basically, if a judge had given us a 9.7 instead of a 9.6, we would have made the podium. So very, very close. And we had to wait for the other competitors to go through their routine to know where we standed, where we would be our final standing in the result. So I think at first we knew we had beat the Americans, which was the first time we did that. And then the Canadian went after us. And so then we got bumped to fourth place. So for a little bit, we were in third, but then got bound down. But more than everything, I think it was knowing that you had a good performance and that you did the best you could, and that we actually had improved from previous competition. So yes, we did miss the medal, but it's a question of like seeing the glass half full or half empty, right? Do you get to the mindset of like, yeah, I made progress, so the glass is half full, instead of like, yeah, I just missed on the medal.
And I get that. Obviously, you got to make the best of what it is. Olympic, and again, we've had Olympic athletes on here before. It's such a grind to make the Olympics. It's every 4 years, and you're basically training for 4 years to get to that moment.
Yep.
And the disappointment or joy of success and failure, and that, you can define that however you want, it's a tough pill to swallow sometimes, or it's just like a culmination of all the hard work you did. I was saying one of the things I don't like about the Olympics and maybe like gymnastics and all that is it's very subjective. I know there's rules, I get it, right? But if you're talking about, let's say, gymnastics or even a synchronized swim, if I give you a 9.5, realistically, what's the plus or minus that other eyes, if I ask 10 other people that are not judging there, what's the plus or minus? I mean, how close are these judges getting to what a real score would get? Or is it, it legitimately could have been a 9, or it could have been a 9.7, what's the range on that? If just a ballpark in your mind.
There could be a pretty big range. And like you said, it's very subjective. They're actually changing at the moment their scoring system to make it less subjective, because at the end of the day, this is a sport where your likes and dislike is important when you're judging like artistic and style and music. Your cultural background is important. You may have countries that like certain things and not others. You may have judges that like a type of music and not others, and that will influence in the end their scoring and their judgment. And in addition to that, it's a team sport, and like any team sport, it takes a little bit of luck to find, to get that team where you have several very good players that will come together in that single moment. So I totally agree with you on the there's a piece of luck. There's definitely a piece of subjectivity, and when it all comes together for the right moment, it's very rare. The result I had with the French team in 2000 for us were exceptional. We had a very good team that had been built over 8 years, not 4, and and then everybody retired after that. So we didn't get a chance for another 4 years. So you're right. Like, I think for a lot of athletes, it's really a matter of a lot of different things coming together to actually be able to perform at the Olympics every 4 years.
Yeah. How did you become a synchronized swimmer? I was saying before, Norm Macdonald, I think it was Norm Macdonald, did some funny bit. It was either synchronized swimming or synchronized diving. Like, people don't just wake up and say, oh, I want to be a synchronized swimmer. Or do they? I don't know. I mean, you probably have some.
Generally, they don't. It is a more prominent and more well-known sport, I would say, in Europe and Asia. So you're more likely then to wake up and want to be a synchronized swimmer. I saw it on TV as a little kid. They were showing the Olympics, the European Championship, and some other competition. And like I said, in France, it's a more normal sport for girls. It's more known. And so after seeing it on TV, I told my parents, this is what I want to do.
Yeah, that's and you were in 2 Olympics. Then you're done. You're going to transition. Then you coached. You became a coach.
Yes, I had some back and forth between the sports world and the business world. I competed for, like I said, the French team in 2000. Then I went to business school and I started working for a hotel company. I moved to Australia with my job. I ended up going back swimming while I was working, and I competed for Australia in Beijing. And then I moved to England with my family and went back into the sports world. So I was coaching for the London 2012 Olympics. Then we moved back to the US, my husband being from here, and worked for the US team and participated in Rio as a team leader for the US team.
Really?
So I've seen quite a few countries.
Yeah, that's interesting. Can you tell us the difference between the experiences as with France and with Australia and the overall, and then also as a coach? Like, what was the major difference, and was there one that stood out, as the most memorable?
So the 2000 Olympics, I think for me, were the most memorable, but because they were the first one, my first experience. So it's like all surprise. It is also the Olympic that I participated that was before 9/11, before COVID. So it was very casual and open. We didn't have as much security as we did in Beijing, and that changed the experience for the athlete, I think. The major difference between Australia and France, from my experience, is that Australia was so patriotic, so proud of their athlete. There is a long history of high-level sport in Australia. They pride themselves in being a small country with a very high-performing Olympic team. And so when you get to the games with the team, they have former athletes that come for a whole day. We had like talk from former athletes. We watch movies about all performances at the Olympics from the Australian. So that was really inspiring. There was a really nice sense of community with that team. And then between being an athlete and a coach, I found it really difficult because as an athlete, yes, you are obviously nervous, and it's a big achievement and goal as an athlete in your life. But as a coach, I felt like I didn't have any control. So, you watch the performance and there's nothing you can do at this point. And it's a really nerve-wracking feeling, where at least when I was in the pool myself, I felt like, okay, even if I'm nervous, like I can control this, I can change it. Whereas a coach, you're like, okay, this is out of my hand. I've done everything I could, and I need to trust the process. And I think for an athlete, that's a difficult situation to be in, like having to step back.
Yeah, any coach, even if you didn't play, because I argue this all the time. The coach gets way too much credit for wins and way too much blame for losses. Certain sports, obviously, in competitions, much more than others. But at the end of the day, you got to perform. I mean, I don't care what the coach does or how good the coach is; they got to perform. So if you go left instead of right, right,
Yeah.
or you miss a layup, or you don't catch an open pass, or it's just so much the coach can do. You try and put them in the right position to do things, and that'll sort of transition into what you've done afterwards, which I want to get to. A couple more points on the Olympics. We see some athletes who sort of they want to be in the Olympics. They're athletes. Say, "What can I do?" Right? Herschel Walker, I think, did the bobsled. And if you were going to pick another sport to do, you had to join the Olympics and train for 4 years to do. What would you pick?
So this is a very interesting question that I haven't been asked, and I really like it. So I personally probably would pick an individual sport, and I would try to pick something that is not subjective. So anything that's different from what I did, just to have another experience.
Right. A goal to hit.
Pardon me?
You have a goal to hit. I know I got to run
Correct.
this, and, or
Correct.
I got to finish this.
So something where you can control the entire thing, which is never true, but at least I feel like I could control it. Have less subjectivity, maybe have a clear goal to do.
If you had to pick one, is there something that you think you might be good at?
Well, I climb now, so I would probably pick rock climbing.
Is that in the Olympics this year?
It is in the Olympics, yes. It's a very interesting sport to watch. What I like about it is there's like a puzzle. So it's very mental as well as physical. And there's an interesting puzzle that needs to be solved as you're doing a sport. But I like sport like where there's a duel as well, like tennis or even judo or some of the combat sport, because you have to react in the moment and adjust to a changing situation, which I find really interesting compared to synchronized swimming, where you have a routine that you perform. There's very little tactical involvement. And so I would have liked to find something that I didn't have in my sport.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. You've been to a bunch of Olympics. Who are any favorite Olympians that you've met before?
I mean, I've met tons of Olympian, and they all are very special in their own ways with different qualities. There are some Olympic moments that I remember and really enjoyed, and one of them is Myriam, who is an Australian diver who won the gold medal in Beijing against the Chinese. So diving is a sport that's really dominated by the Chinese, and it was in China, and he ended up on his very last dive having a perfect dive, and he won over the Chinese in Beijing.
Isn't that
so
weird?
That was a very special moment.
It's kind of weird. You think I can understand why basketball is a U.S. thing, and maybe I don't know, ping pong, but diving seems like a weird thing to be dominated by Chinese. Why can't others break that? And there's a lot of these Olympic sports that are like that. Just they're always, it's a country and they dominate it.
Yeah, it's very, and a lot of it is very cultural. I think in China there's a long history of good base in gymnastic and in some of the artistic sport, and diving is an offshoot of gymnastic. A lot of gymnasts move on to diving, but there's a long history of very good Chinese divers.
When you look at China, Russia, these people are born at a very young age. They're into Olympic training, and so it's a different experience than, say, the U.S. And I know the U.S. has a good Olympic training. It's not the same. It's just not the same, right? There's just not the intense. This is what you're going to do. We need to breed and build Olympic champions, and even almost in translate to soccer in Europe.
And I think the
Olympics, the U.S. do so well with not having that.
Well, first of all, the U.S. does well in most sports, so I think there is a culture of athletics from a young age, and there's so many young people that are playing sport that from a sheer number, you would get a good result. I think in the US, the Olympic movement is really driven by the collegiate sport, and that really helps get good base in a lot of different sport. And generally, the results are driven by a handful of like really good, athletics, gymnastics, swimming, and some of the team sport are driving the result. Where if you look at some other countries, um, like you said, there might be some niches. Like in France, we have very good judo, handball, fencing, not sports that you would envision as like your mainstream
Right.
sport in the US. So it is very cultural, like you said. It really depends on where you're at.
I got on the lottery to buy Paris 24 tickets. I got some soccer and basketball. I don't know if I'll be able to go, but it was cool. Is there a sport that you like to watch more than others? And would you say that there's something that is really exciting in person that maybe sitting at home doesn't tell the story?
I love watching team handball. Growing up in France, it's a huge sport for us. And as a team sport, it's really fast. And I really enjoy, it's a mix of volleyball and soccer together. So I really enjoy that. I don't get to see it as much in the US. So generally, that's something I like to watch. But when it comes to the Olympics, I like to watch a lot of different things. So
I think
I'll watch the gymnastics and the track. I'm not so much into the swimming, but I'll try to like watch things that we don't always see
yeah.
um, in the off years.
I'm excited for ping pong. I think they're going to do that, and curling is always people love curling. I don't know what it's
Yep.
feels like it's any man's kind of sport. That's the type of thing but it's so hard. You don't realize how good these people are at what they do until you kind of come up against them, which is amazing. Do you have any sense of who you think the greatest Olympians of all time are that you've seen, like a Mount Rushmore, the four best?
Hmm.
I always like to ask about Mount Rushmore is the greatest in a given category.
Um,
I mean, I think
I think
Usain Bolt's up
that's
there.
really difficult because we hear a lot of big names. They're the greatest Olympians, and I like to look at the smaller sport and those individuals who have been able to sustain a certain level for a long period of time. There is a lady, a gymnast, who competed in 2000 and still competes today for, I want to say Romania or Bulgaria. She's quite incredible. There was an English triple jumper that did like 4 or 5 Olympics. I'm terrible with names, so I can't tell you what names.
I agree with you. I get drawn to like the Michael Phelps of the world and Katie Ledecky and Usain Bolt, mostly because they get an opportunity to win 4 or 5 medals every year. So it's not the same as just someone who can really just win one. But some of
They also in sports where they have the chance to win multiple medals,
that's what I mean.
especially in swimming, where in other sports you're not able to do that. You have one Olympic medal possible every 4 years. So it's really hard to count by the number of medals. But for someone to be able to sustain being at the top level of the Olympics for multiple Olympics, that's incredible.
And what impresses me about someone like the Bolton, I mean, I watch her swim, and like there's no one even close. You watch, and it's like crazy. And you watch Bolt run, and you're like, well, nobody's going to beat this guy, right? I mean, I would like to see him race until he gets beat. I think it should be a new rule in Olympics. You got to race until you lose.
You got to keep going until someone beats you. Yes.
Yeah, because I mean, it's great to go up on top, right? I mean, a lot of people want to do that, and that's going to transition. It wasn't intentional, but that's going to transition us to what you're doing now. Career ends, you coach, then that's over. What do you do next? These athletes, everyone wants to go out on top. Very few do. They keep playing and playing, a lot of it because that's who they are. That's what they know. That's their comfort zone. And your career is done. And now what? And and that's why you decided to do what you do. How did that come to be? Obviously, you said you went to business school as you're swimming, but how does this come to be that this is what you want to do?
Part of the inspiration for Athlete Soul is personal, and part is also the meetings that I had with other former athletes who helped create the organization. The personal experience is that I had two retirement myself. The first one before the Athens Olympics. When I got into business school, I ended up being asked by my coaches to choose between going to business school and preparing for the Olympics. So I left the sport and I went to business school thinking, I come from a very niche sport where you can't make a living. And so I need to think about the rest of my life and what that will look like. So that was a pretty bittersweet decision. And I was lucky enough to be able to go back to the sport and compete again and have a second retirement, which then was on my own terms. And I was able to compare these two experiences and be like, oh, that's what it looks like when it's not your choice and it's pretty hard. But if you
how many people get to choose?
Everyone
can choose.
Athletes don't.
Everyone can choose, but they go past that line where a lot of it is they're asked to. Is it?
And you would be surprised. There are a lot of different reasons for retiring. It could be that you can't afford to play your sport anymore, that your partner or your training partner has retired. That happens a lot in like table tennis or figure skating, like sport where you heavily rely on training with someone else. It could be that your sport was cut. We've seen that with COVID. It could be a change of like qualification rules. There are a lot of different ways, and obviously it could be injuries, it could be serious injury, it could be multiple injuries that are recurring. So there are many reasons why athletes retire and don't go out in their own terms. And this is partly why Athlete Soul exists. We want to help athletes during that transition process away from sport, but also before they retire. What can they do to learn more about themselves and who they are outside of sport, and also take steps to prepare for that transition and what comes next. So
we see a lot of people doing business and thinking about afterwards before they end. You'll see that a lot in the people that we've met through Mark Moyer and the Win Again Club Room. But Andrew Petcash has a very good newsletter about influencers and athletes who are investing and doing business. There's a lot of different ways. We hear all kinds of things, right? People getting into real estate, getting into financial literacy. What's the process for Athlete Soul as you engage with these athletes?
Yeah. First of all, we're very much focused on personal identity and knowing who you are outside of sport. So we really start from that mindset of like, let's get to learn what you like in life, what you want to do. And we consider the transition as kind of being multidimensional. So not just a career change, but let's look at all the areas of your life and approach that transition from a holistic perspective. So we work with athletes from their identity to the structure of their daily life, to nutrition, sleep, finances, career. So there's a lot of different aspects. And we offer two main programs. One is for current competing athlete. It's called Beyond Sport. It's a group coaching program that we start every 2 months. We have a new cohort. And so in a group environment with other athletes from different sport, athletes work on defining and developing who they are outside of sport, exploring different interests and taking steps to prepare for what's next. And we also have a transition coaching program. This one specifically for someone who is about to retire or just retired, and it's pairing them with a professional coach who is also a former athlete, and they work for an extended period of time to help them through that process, with the goal of like mitigating some of the challenges, but also accelerating that transition and having someone on their side to be able to give them perspective. So we approach it very much from a coaching strategy, but it's not sports coaching. It's really life coaching and personal development.
Is there a type of athlete or sport that you guys generally deal with that gravitates towards you? That's more, I don't want to say fit for the program, but just seems to. I don't know. Every time you have something, you seem to have a certain type of
Yep.
person or athlete.
Yeah, so we serve athletes from all sports and background. So, collegiate, professional, Olympian, but generally the athletes that we get don't fit into any other program that is offered by their organization. So we'll look at like semi-professional, lower tier professional athlete, very niche Olympic sport that don't have access to as many resources, or your Division 3, Division 2 collegiate athletes that are about to retire, or the athletes who does not want their sport or their team or their federation to know that they're thinking about retirement. So we sort of serve that underserved, from a resource perspective, community of athletes.
It's
I think
how long is it?
The benefit of working with us is that they have access to all of our services for free. That's a huge benefit. We are a nonprofit, so we fundraise money so that they can have access to our services for free through scholarships, and we want to keep it like this for as long as we can. And so I think that's what makes us special, and where kind of these type of athletes gravitates to us as well.
Well, that's an important thing. There's no charge to an athlete joining
Yep.
in your program. How do you raise money?
So we do fundraising events. We have donation from former athlete, sponsorships, grants. It's a range of things. And as we're growing at the moment, we really like trying to raise more funds so that we can support more athletes. Generally, we've been supporting about 30 to 50 athletes on an individual basis per year, and then way more from a group perspective and with the networking that we offer as well.
How long does someone typically stay with you before? I think you could have this stuff sort of from the time you start till the end of your next career, but how long does it take someone to get it and really start to thrive? Is there of course everything changes, but is there something you're seeing that it takes a certain amount of time?
It definitely takes a long time, and I think for any athletes, it takes several years to like feel comfortable in what's next. From a service perspective, the athletes are generally with us for a minimum of 3 months, and they stay for 6 months or a year, and sometimes more. A lot of the athletes that we have serviced are now volunteering for the organization and helping kind of grow as well. But we service them for as long as we can. We encourage them to stay part of the community. And the process of the transition is a very long process. Like in any transition in life, it's not something that happens overnight, and you go through up and downs. And to really feel comfortable in what you're doing next, I think it takes several years.
Yeah, it's tough for athletes to transition, of course. Financially, probably the biggest thing for them, depending on what type of athlete it is. But maybe there's someone who wasn't making a lot of money, and it's what let's say, aside from the finances of your next step, what's the biggest challenge and roadblock for these athletes?
From our perspective and the athletes that we work with, the biggest challenge is the identity challenge. Even for someone who is well placed, that may have a job lineup, that have a college degree, that knows what they want to do next, I think leaving behind, well, not leaving behind because it's part of you for the rest of your life, but defining yourself as more than an athlete is a very big challenge. And in figuring out, what do they like outside of their sport is something we see a lot, as well as finding purpose in what they're doing next. So I think as an athlete, you're used to doing something that you're extremely passionate about, that that's what you've liked for your whole your youth. into adulthood, it's your first passion, and then you go and find a job and you often don't feel as excited about it. I think um, that's a big challenge for a lot of athletes. And so finding that spark in the next life and what will drive them from an identity perspective is a difficult one.
I think that's difficult for a lot of people, not knowing what they want to do, what they're good at, what they would like to do. That's a big challenge. There's all kind of tests. My sister's big into these tests, personality tests, and um, I mean that's a challenge for everyone, right?
I think it's a challenge for everyone, but I think it's perhaps even more so challenging when you have known what you liked and been to the highest level of that, and then having to like go through that process again and think, oh my God, I have to build this up, the same way I built my sport for 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would think not being very good or the best at something would be a big challenge, thinking it might be beneath them, which is understandable.
Yeah.
I have those feelings myself, and I haven't achieved anything that's, shocking the world yet. So these are all challenges, again, stuff that I would have or that other people would have. Do you find that they have a leg up on finding the next, the doors open easier for them? I mean, I think depending on who you are, how big you are, but
obviously I think depending on your exactly what you said, who you are, the doors will open or not. I think if you're still competing, definitely being an athlete opens a lot of door. And once you're retired, that fades very quickly. So being able to make connection before you retire and sort of identify a few industries or a few connections that will matter for you, I think that's super important. Because once you're retired, that will go away pretty quickly. And then if you're not able to articulate what you've learned from sport well, I think that can be a hindrance in the interview and job seeking process. But if you can articulate that well and use your sport as an example of what you can achieve, then the soft skills that you have developed, then that will work to your advantage when looking for jobs. And then I think athletes, once they get into the workplace, I think they start thriving and progressing pretty quickly. So once you get there and you learn the technical stuff, I think athletes have a leg up on all the soft skills, and generally like will do pretty well in jobs. And especially if you look at like specific jobs like in sales or in technology or finance, like generally athletes do super well.
is there someone who's not good for the program that you would say, no, we don't want to help you?
There's very few athletes we would say that to, and usually there would be a very specific reason. Generally, that would be related to mental health. So someone who has a need for a clinician and needs to go through therapy. This is not what we do. We really offer a goal-oriented, action-based, coaching support, life coaching support. If someone has a mental illness and they need to see a therapist, there's a completely different service, and that's not something that we offer. So we would generally refer those people for those services.
I had a poll today on LinkedIn, my post, I don't know if you saw it. It says, what makes you an expert? I was just curious about and that was to be question, what makes you an expert? So like, is it that you said you're an expert? Is it that people say you're an expert, that you train for, like did X amount, you've hit the highest levels? Because there's a lot of experts out there that I don't know that are actually experts, even though other people say they're experts, and even though they say they're an expert themselves. Or I would think if you do something enough, you're an expert. That would think I would be the definite, like there's hard to argue.
Are you asking me what the definition of an expert is?
Or I'm just asking you, like, what do you do to make sure that you have the right people in place to be guiding these people? And they don't have to be an expert. They don't necessarily have to be an expert. That's a really, it's a little bit of the definition.
I think you're right, and it's a very wide term. We have a group of 20 coaches that we work with, and we have we have certain things that we look for our coaches to work with us. So first of all, they're all former athletes. They're all certified professional life coaches, whether some of them have special certification, whether it's in nutrition or career coaching, or it could be more on the mental health side. We try to select coaches that have a mental health background. So we have quite a few that have been either licensed therapists or still licensed therapists, or work as social worker, or have a psychology degree. And then they go through a training on our program and methods and our services and how we function. That's pretty extensive. So we have a set of things that we look for our coaches to be joining us.
What do you think about the I always ask this to all the coaches, and the cliche, those who can't do coach?
Those who can do, that cannot be athletes coach?
Yeah, I mean, they say those that can't do coach. So like if you, whether it's athletes, it could be music, it could be anything really.
So personally, that's a quite wide question, but when it applies to athlete soul, I don't think we get this a lot, because all of us are really driven by, we had a pretty difficult transition ourselves, and we want to help other people. And so I'm not talking for myself because I am not a coach within the organization. I really just work on the operational side. But for our coaches, they have been trained to do that type of work. And so they've taken steps to be able to become coaches and work with athletes as coaches. I think often you're correct. There is I can't do this, so I'm going to do that, without thoughts and process on how to become qualified in that field.
Yeah, and your stuff, Athlete Soul is not a good example of that, because you're not charging people to help them. Whereas other people say, I'd love to help you do this. I'd like to invite you to, and then there's a cost associated with it. And then, my mom was big into these get rich scheme books. And I'm like, if these people had a get rich, like, why wouldn't they just get rich themselves instead of just selling you the books on how to get rich, and you could do it yourself and then you can give it away? I mean, that's the reality of it, in my opinion. If I knew a way to get rich quick, I'd just do it myself, and then I'd be rich enough where I don't have to charge other people money, and I'd want to help everybody get rich. So that's what I mean by those who can't do coach. They're charging you to do something where it's like, well, why don't you just do that yourself?
And I want to clarify something, is there is a cost associated with running our programs. We just fundraise to cover those costs.
I mean, there's no cost to the athlete. When you're inviting someone to participate in the program, you're not asking them for money.
Correct. And I think it's something that we feel very strongly about. We want to support athletes. This is our mission. And one of the major point is that an athlete who is about to retire does not have the fund to seek support. And so we want to be able to remove that barrier so that they're seeking support and they're receiving support. So that's one thing. We also don't do affiliate programs, so we won't recommend a certain program because we're getting a kickback from it. For example, for us, that's a big conflict of interest, so we're very strict with that. We will recommend certain things because they're good, not because we believe they're good for the athletes, not because we're getting financial support from it. So we started with very specific values that we wanted to follow, and so far we really are sticking by them. It's very important for us.
Yeah, I think that's extremely important to, because I think people can see through that. There's a lot of people who don't care, and people who can be easily fooled. But I think sticking to what you believe in and not compromise, because there is a lot of pay for play. That's all over the place, and frankly, it's a big detractor for me. Is like, I'd rather we get better content when we're not paying to be shown or applauded or whatever. So it goes back to like you could have thousands of people say you're an expert and hang on your every word. I don't know what that means, but other than you have a big following and maybe you can monetize that.
Yep.
So it's interesting, just the landscape that's out there. And I mean, there's a lot of coaching out there, and I
And
don't.
listen, I think part of our work, we do very little social media or general promotion. We're not really counting who is following us, but we've invested in making sure that there's good word of mouth of our program. Like people come to our program because they've heard someone else using it and they enjoyed it. So when you really invest in the quality of the program, the relationship, you get a lot of business back from that because people know it's good quality. So we're approaching it, from that angle.
Yeah, and I'd say you're maybe even more of a mentor than a coach. Is that fair?
It's fair. We kind of stay away from the word mentor because there is this idea that you're getting a more informal, less structured, less expert guidance than you do with a professional coach. So we have people that are professionally trained and are investing their time to remain trained and up to date with different trends and how to work with athletes, and are constantly educating themselves. So we call them coach because we want to recognize that. But I agree with you that there's a part of it that is mentoring.
Yeah, to me, there's just so many things that there's not a playbook for, and that's why. But people will tell you there's a playbook for it, but everything's different. Like, if you're gonna teach me and you're gonna coach me, or you're gonna coach someone else. I mean, you have your principles on the guidelines, but that's sort of anything you could read in a book, and so what I find value in is it sort of goes, let's go back to the Olympic stuff that you talked about, is having to adapt to be like, you know what, this person isn't going to fit in this box. Now what do I do?
Yes. And that's the essence.
They're not coachable.
That's the essence of our one-on-one coaching program. We have a set of guidelines. We have things that the coaches work through. We have different challenges that are highlighted with solutions and exercises and assignment. But at the end of the day, the program is led by the athlete. What's their biggest problem? How do we solve that? What do they want to achieve? How do we help them achieve that? So there is a lot of flexibility for the coach to move things around in the program to be able to answer those challenges and goals from the athletes, and really truly customize the coaching and the effort towards what they want.
Who's the best coach you ever had?
Oh, that's a very interesting question that will get a different answer from different athletes.
No, you. Who's the best coach that you've ever had?
Oh, that I have for myself. In sport, I had a lot of different coaches, and I don't know if there was one that was better than others. They all have different skills, and I always try to pick and remember the good part of what they were providing. So I would mention different people for different things.
Give me one. Let's give someone some credit here. Let's give us a name.
There is one person who has become a really good friend that I worked with, who is a gymnastic coach in France. His name is Fred Pascalin. He works for the best gymnastic coach, the best gymnastic club in France at the moment. He's worked with a lot of other different sports, and he's been able to apply his skills to different sport. I think I like his approach because it really comes from a whole person, psychology-based coaching style. And he's definitely the best coach I've been in contact with.
What was his name?
Fred Pascalin.
Fred Pascal. All right, we give him some credit here on the Wolff Den. You're born in France.
Yes.
You obviously you're an Australian citizen. If you
Yes.
and now you're in the U.S. Are you a U.S. citizen?
Yes.
So you have owned 3 citizenships.
Yes.
How do you choose if they're playing each other? And in a sport world, point of view, and what does your world view look like, having been a citizen of 3 different places?
So picking sport, when I'm watching sport, who do I pick?
Yeah.
I generally want the best person to win. So I try not to pick. I think it depends on the sport. Yeah, I think it depends on the sport and the team who I would pick.
You might want France to beat US, or you might want the US to beat Australia, and you might want Australia to beat France.
I usually want the Australian to win in swimming because it's their favorite sport and they love it. I generally want France to win in soccer.
Yeah.
So I think it depends on the sport. But my view, I mean, listen, I've lived in 5 different countries. Obviously, you have 3 different citizenship, and I've traveled all over the place. Have a very global view of the world, and
Well, they're very different places. I mean, they're all 3
different
very
places, different continents. Yes, absolutely. And I you see all the talks on the media and the division, and it's all nonsense to me, because everywhere I've been, I've met wonderful people, and I have found that there are very few differences when you come down to the basic of life. Like, we all the same.
Yeah, but
So I just wish people would travel more and see how things are overseas, and you realize, oh, that's so interesting. Like, I've learned so many different things that I wasn't brought up with, and still they work. You raise your kids differently, and still they become good people.
yeah.
They grow up in a different environment, and still they become good people too. So it's really interesting to see that you can do things differently, and still today, like, I feel like I always want to see what someone else will do, how someone else will do things, because it gives you good ideas and a perspective on what you take for granted and you think that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I've traveled quite a bit, a lot of countries. I maintain that the US is the best country in the world. I would never want to live anywhere else. I'd love to visit elsewhere. I'd never want to live anywhere else. You've lived in other places. You're here, you came here because of your husband, but ideally, if you could live and pick the place that you wanted to, I'm not saying you can't, but would it be here? Would it be back in France, Australia? Would it be somewhere different?
I would probably pick Sydney because it's such a beautiful city, and because of the environment and the setup of the city. It's pristine, it's clean, like, it's really beautiful. So more from the beauty of it, that's probably where I would pick. I
Who has the
really
best food?
Sydney actually has very good food. But from a personal preference, I really love Asia and everywhere in Asia. So I could probably live in a lot of different countries in Asia. I like the food, I like the culture, and I like to go to places that I haven't lived yet.
You haven't lived yet.
One of the,
Where haven't you been? What's on your bucket list that you haven't been to that you'd like to visit?
I would like to go to Mongolia, Nepal. There's some more remote places that I haven't been to, and I didn't do a lot. I haven't done a lot in Africa, so I would like to do that too.
A safari? Would you go on a safari?
I haven't yet. No.
You zip line? Are you adventurous? Would you zip line and whitewater
Oh,
raft?
absolutely, yeah.
I guess that's a stupid question. You're climbing mountains. Would you climb a mountain with it, not rock climbing, like a mountain climbing?
No.
Do you see the documentary of the speed climber?
Pardon me?
The speed climber, the speed climber who climbs mountains, rock. There's a
So
documentary on Netflix about this guy who like breaks world records, and it's pretty
I think
interesting.
you're talking about Kilian Jornet, which is a Spanish
Right?
trail / rock climber who he like runs the Everest. It's pretty impressive. I mean, listen, I'm not too much into like mountain running because there's so many people and it's so crowded. If you look at the Mont Blanc or the Everest, like I don't really want to be in a line. It's like running a marathon for me in a city. Like I don't want to be with that many people trying to achieve something. I'm more of a loner when it comes to that. I'll go do trail and by myself.
I get it. I'm probably the same way. Except for festivals, I'm fine getting in the crowd for a good music festival. Where can people donate, and what's an event that they can join or participate in that would help, athlete's soul?
So any individual can donate on our website, athletesoul.org. We also get recurring donation from former athletes. So if you're a former athlete and you kind of believe in what we're doing, you can become a former athlete member, which is an annual recurring donation to the organization. That's also explained on our website. We also host an annual fundraiser in August called Run for the Soul. And so during that event, people can donate. And again, it's promoted on our website and our social platforms. So if you follow us, you will see that coming up this summer.
Yeah, athletesoul.org is the website. On Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at athletes soul, so plural athletes, and then soul. We're going to let you out of the Wolff Den with the same question everybody gets. You can spend a day with anybody in the world. You can't be related to them, and they have to be alive. Who would you pick, and what would you guys do?
Whoa, that's a hard question.
What comes to mind? Someone, it doesn't have, it could be a celebrity, someone nobody knows that you've admired. There's someone that you haven't met.
It would probably be that guy I just mentioned, the Spaniard who does all the trail running, just doing a trail or a hike in Norway, in some of the fjords and on the beautiful mountains of Norway, probably something like that.
All right. Well, we're attempting to make all of this happen for our guests. I say if you get enough money or influence, you can make anything happen. So we're hoping that's the case. We got 271 episodes and a lot of different answers. Some unique, one answer we're not going to get. Someone wanted to meet Putin, and we're just not going to make that happen, regardless if we can or not. But everyone else is fair game. So we're going to put that on the list. Check out athletesoul.org. Donate if you can, or try and find a way to get involved. It's a great program that's helping athletes who are transitioning, and if they need our help the same as everyone else does. It was great to chat with you, and I look forward to seeing what comes next for you guys, and hopefully being a part of it down the line.
Right. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for talking about Athlete Soul. We really believe in what we're doing, and so it's great to be able to share more about what we do.
Yep. We'll have an update soon, and we got another episode tomorrow, so stay tuned.